Like any hobby, photography comes with its own language. When shooting with a DSLR, it's worth learning a few key terms and concepts that'll help you understand how your camera works. The SLR of DSLR stands for single lens reflex, or the internal mechanisms your camera uses to capture an image. Of all cameras, DSLRs offer the most user control, letting you swap out lenses and use advanced options for changing focus, exposure, and color. Lenses come in two key varieties. Prime lenses are fixed focal length lenses. You can get specialty prime lenses to shoot wide-angle shots, close-ups, or portraits. Zoom lenses let you use a range of focal lengths, so they allow you to shoot several magnifications without taking a step. They're convenient, flexible, and let you take the photo the way you want it, instead of having to crop the image later on. File format is the file type your camera creates when it stores all the bits of photo data used in an image. Most DSLRs offer a choice of file format. The format you choose affects the file size, picture quality, and the types of programs you'll need to view your photos. The JPEG format creates compressed files and takes up less memory. Camera RAW files are not compressed, so they take up a lot of storage space. A handful of cameras also offer TIFF format. TIFF files are a lossless image format and retain your picture at its highest quality. Exposure refers to the overall brightness and contrast of a photo. There are three settings that have to do with exposure: aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. Aperture controls the amount of light that hits the image sensor by adjusting the opening in your camera lens. Aperture is measured in f-stops. A lower f-stop number, such as f2.8, produces a wider aperture which lets in more light. The aperture setting affects depth of field, or the distance over which objects in the picture appear sharply focused. The higher the aperture setting, the greater the depth of field. The depth of field is reduced when you lower the aperture setting. Shutter speed is the amount of time your camera's shutter is open, allowing in light. It's measured in fractions of a second and is needed to freeze action. Use too slow of a shutter and your photo will be blurry. The ISO setting is what determines your DSLR sensor's light sensitivity. A higher ISO can produce noise in your image, or the grainy, speckled effect you sometimes see in photos. Digital cameras use a process called white balancing to make sure your photo has accurate colors in any light source. Most cameras have a built-in meter to set white balance. DSLRs also offer controls that let you manually set your white balance for a specific type of light. DSLRs have a wide selection of shooting modes depending on how much control you want over your exposure settings. In automatic mode, your camera makes all the decisions for you. It effectively turns your DSLR into a fancy point-and-shoot camera. When your camera is set to programmed exposure mode, the camera controls most exposure settings, but gives you control over things like ISO setting or use of flash. In aperture priority mode, you set the aperture, and the camera uses its sensor to pick the shutter speed. Shutter priority mode is just the opposite. Set the shutter speed, and the camera selects the aperture for you. In manual mode, you choose all the settings. Composition refers to how you position objects in your photo. The rule of thirds is a common composition tip. Mentally divide the frame into thirds, like tic-tac-toe, and position important elements of your photo where those grid lines intersect, rather than placing objects directly in the middle of the photo. Mergers are a common composition problem. Mergers happen when unrelated subjects come together by accident. The classic merger is a tree growing out the top of somebody's head. They also happen when things seem to grow out of the edges of the picture, like if you have a tree branch drooping down into your image but you don't actually see the tree anywhere in the rest of the photo.